So, all right, we are at top of the hour. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being with us today for our next installment of our February winter webinar series. We are super excited to have you with us to talk all about brand storytelling and marketing. We have with us today Kaileen Powers from Walker Clay, who is one of our newest associate members. They joined last year. You may even recognize her from the festival running around emptying slush buckets, fetching you ice, or helping out at the conference. She's been an incredible asset, not only from a resource standpoint, but for some brawn at some of our events too. So we're super excited about that. So, um, Colleen's going to walk us through all the different ways that you should be amplifying your brand and taking it beyond the tap room. So, without further ado, I will turn things over to her.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited to dive right in and explore how we can use brand storytelling to elevate your business. So, today we're going to be unpacking a lot. There's a lot for whatever level you're at. So, we're going to be looking at what branding really is beyond just a logo, why meaningful merch matters in storytelling. And then the real meat and potatoes will be a three steps framework to building a brand for yourself. And then some ways on how to protect it. So first, before we get started, hello, again, my name is Kaileen Powers. And a little bit about me, I've always been extremely passionate about storytelling through the use of visual language. Over the years, I've worked as an artist. I've worked with various retail apparel brands to build their stories and products. And I've also collaborated with major sports leagues like the NFL and NHL to protect their brand integrity through the use of making sure every product made lined up with their style guides. Today, I work in branded merch and I specialize in working with beverage and CPG brands just like you. And I help everyone from regional startups to national names translate that brand story you've carefully crafted into tangible marketing products. So that experience has given me a unique perspective on specifically that good storytelling through merchandise and marketing doesn't just drive revenue, it creates lasting emotional connections. And that's what today is all about. So before we get started, just as a baseline, what exactly is branding, right? Branding is your company's distinct identity. It combines elements like your name, your logo, design, messaging, and visual language to communicate your brand's personality and values. It's what's going to set you apart. It's why someone's going to pick your bottle or can up to next to all the others in the shelf, or why they're going to go into your brewery. And notice how I said branding isn't a logo, right? But a logo is important and it's a part of the brand. It's your shorthand for this full story. So think about something like the Nike swoosh, just a curve in black and white, yet it's instantly going to help you recall sneakers, workouts, or even personal memories. Now, speaking of logos specifically, we can look at some of the micro sections of logos on this screen. You don't even see the whole thing, and yet the fonts, the colors, and the icons bring up a world of associations at a second's glance. You're probably not just thinking of the logo, but maybe you're thinking of, that refreshing can of Coke or going to a Starbucks with friends when you see some of these micro sections. And that's what great branding is. It's going to build not only recognition, but it's going to build trust, it's going to spark emotion, and it's going to make people prefer you in a crowded market. And here's a really simple way of thinking of the full picture. I love this phrase. Marketing is asking someone on a date, but branding is the reason why they say yes. Branding is all of the hard work before you even get to the marketing part, because being authentic, consistent, and clear is what it's all about. Just like dating, it's not about pretending to be someone else. It's about putting your best foot forward while you're staying true to who you are. So first, we're going to look at an example of great brand storytelling in action, and then we're going to work backwards and talk about how we can build a great story for ourselves. So let's talk about merch. It's my favorite thing in the world because good merch is basically a walking billboard for a great brand story. And my all-time favorite example is the Austin 316 t-shirt. Personally, for me, one that looks just like this is something that I got in the fourth grade, and it was my favorite t-shirt that I've ever worn. I wore that thing practically until it was falling apart, much to my mother's dismay. And every time I put it on, I felt cool, like I was a part of Stone Cold Steve Austin's crew. It gave me a sense of belonging, like I was a part of something bigger than myself. And actually, this shirt helped me make new friends when I moved to a new school. And this isn't about, wrestling or a t-shirt, but the point of it is that I wasn't the only kid that felt this way. This shirt was absolutely everywhere, and it's probably one of the best-selling shirts of all time because Stone Cold Steve Austin and WWE in the 90s were at the height of their popularity. This wasn't just a shirt, it was an identity, and that's what we're talking about today. Behind what seems like a simple black and white t-shirt was a ton of strategy, storytelling, and brand power that turned it into one of the best-selling pieces of merch for one of the largest companies. And why that is because it perfectly embodied his character, right? There was a story behind this guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was rebellious, defiant, beer drinking, anti-authority. That shirt wasn't just random text on cotton, otherwise, people wouldn't have wanted to buy it. It was storytelling that you could wear and buy into. And we know this is something that's a part of WWE's business model to this day. Today, slightly recently, in 2023 alone, they had $23.8 million dollars in merch sales at just live events. And to put that in perspective, I think it was something like 130 to 140 live events that year. So they were selling a ton of t-shirts. And why am I talking about this? Well, because WWE is not a merch line and neither are you, but good merch can power your brand and product. It can amplify your story. It can even power your product by generating more revenue. But more so than that, it becomes a conversation starter, it builds community, and it creates free advertising that fans are thrilled to pay for. And even if you take the merch part of it away, the good storytelling is what people buy into about the character. So at the very least, you can get that part of it out of it. And you don't need to be the WWE to benefit from any of this. As a brewer or beverage brand, your merch can fund reinvestment into your principal product, and you can use great storytelling to create deeper loyalty and keep your brand visible long after the bottle is empty. So now that we've kind of looked at good brand storytelling in action, how do we actually build a brand? This is a three-step process I come back to a lot. And this is where I say this can be a little something for everyone, regardless of your level. If you're just starting out or if you're a long-time marketer and a lot of this is familiar to you. Because this is a great exercise to define or refine your brand, but it's also a great exercise to get to understand your competitors, other people in the market, or just take a pulse on your brand if you feel like you need to clean things up a little bit. So the three steps are really simple, but a little bit more complex than you'd think. You have to answer, who are you? Then, what words describe you? And then, what visuals express who you are? So I'm going to be looking at two case studies. In both cases, I'm just showing you things that I'm fans of. These are not brands I work with. I thought I'd keep it fair by going non-Massachusetts brewing and brands I don't work with, just so we can kind of have this exercise fun together. So, uh-oh, this guy again. I promise there's a point, and it's not just you accidentally signed up for a 45-minute presentation on wrestling. I wanted to go back to that shirt we were talking about and do these steps so you can figure out how did they create the stories to sell so many Austin 316 t-shirts. So let's do these steps together with Austin 316. Step one is the simplest yet the hardest because you have to answer, who are you? And that can be really complicated, right? It could be, why do you brew this beer? Or what else do you like to do? And it shouldn't be a mission statement. That's for something else. This should be a simple but comprehensive answer as to what your brand really is. And you want to keep it two sentences maximum. This should be really quick and to the point. Maybe you start with the multi-page mission statement, but at the end of it, like a triangle coming down, you need to make sure that you're coming to that two-sentence max answer. So just like if I were to ask you, who are you? And a not great answer would just be, I'm a brewer, or our brand is a beer brand. A bad answer for this guy would be, I'm a wrestler in the WWE, right? That's telling us nothing about the story, the character, the brand. And if that was the story, no one would buy that shirt. A much better answer would be Stone Cold Steve Austin is the rebellious, beer drinking anti-hero who defies authority and raises hell. He's known for his no-nonsense attitude and the Austin 316 catchphrase. See how that paints the whole picture now? I can see him walking down the ramp, shaking his head, middle fingers in the air, shotgunning a couple beers just from those two sentences alone. Now, what we're going to do is drill that down even more. And we're going to play with some words here. You can start with maybe 15 to 20 that are descriptor words that connect to that two-sentence answer of who are you. And once you create that list, you're going to choose three that explain it in the clearest way, and that's going to be your North Star. So here's some example of some words that I came up with from that sentence about Stone Cold. And then for the three that I land on are defiant, rebellious, antihero. And the reason why this is important is we're going to take those words and now we're going to go into step three and translate those words into a visual language using icons, textures, materials, and color. Visual language and visual style is going to tell your story without words when you can't use them or at a second's glance. So the reason why this has to be very simple, very drilled down, and you really want those like three standout words is because the more words you're using, the more images you're going to pull and the more muddied the story is. You really don't have a lot of time to express these points of view and these story elements. So having it really defined first before you pull visuals will make it all very, very clean. So I hope from these images you can kind of start to see maybe where they built that visual style for Stone Cold Steve Austin. And now, how does this happen to work in action? Now, when you look at the Austin 316 t-shirt and these other pieces of marketing materials and merch for him, you can really start to see the story that they've built. It's not random, it's very, very intentional. Snakes on the vest, the pickup truck, the leather, this dark black and white type. It's not just a shirt. It's these three simple but complex steps executed cleanly and clearly. These merch items and printed products tell the whole story without using a lot of words. And that's how a simple tea turned into a multi-million dollar phenomenon. So now let's do a quick little rundown of something more in our space, right? Same three steps, new brand. I've chosen Long Trail Brewing because I'm a New Englander. I love the Vermont story, and their branding is super, super consistent. Again, I'm just pulling a random thing that I'm just a fan of, and I don't work with them because I think this is a great way to find a strong example of everything we're talking about when it comes to strong brand story and consistent visual language. So, running through those three steps again, first starting with who are you? They are really good at answering this question on their website. So, a lot of this is just pulled from there. I think they would say something like, we're the Long Trail guys, the brewers who put up Vermont craft beer on the map in 1989 with Long Trail Ale, rooted in hiking culture and community that inspired our name. What started in the old mill with recycled green bottles has grown into a Vermont tradition as iconic as the trail itself. Notice we're talking place, Vermont, origin, 1989, culture of hiking and community, and a clear vibe, heritage and outdoors. A designer or copywriter could run with that, but it's very, very simple and to the point. They clearly know exactly who they are as a brand. So again, if I were trying to take a pulse on this brand or figure out those three words for myself, these are some of the words I come up with, and I find myself rooted in outdoorsy, Vermont rooted, and trailblazing to take that sentence, that explainer, and drill it down to an even simpler way. And taking those three words and translating them into a visual style, I'm looking at icons and materials like flannel pattern, wood grain, topography lines, trail markers, hikers. cheersing around the fire, Vermont landscapes, and color cues like forest greens and trail sign reds. I hope you're starting to see that clear line that we're starting to build and creating that story with visuals. Now, one thing I want to kind of call out here, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, like obviously we're looking at a mood board here I had created. If you've never made a mood board before, the takeaway is not make a mood board for your brand today. You know, if you're a brewer or you're a brand owner, that's not necessarily what you need to do. But you can play with these words and then have a simple folder on your desktop, and you can start pulling images and colors that you like that you feel like connect to those words. And likewise with things like the words or even answering who are you, if that feels a little overwhelming to you, you can always tap into resources like copywriters, or you can even use things like ChatGPT and other AI language models to work through these steps. Now, as this sprayer brand, how this looks in action, we can look at their touch points, you know, again, just pulling stuff online. Um, we start to really see that visual language that we built in the previous slide come together, right? Trail motifs and landscape silhouettes. In the signage, we're seeing things like wood racks and trail style arrows. None of this stuff is random. All of it is very intentional. It's on story for this outdoorsy, Vermont-rooted, trailblazing, enduring brand, and that's why it lands. And that's why they can make some beautiful merch magic too, right? All of this stuff feels very connected to them. If you think about this slide and you compare it to Stone Cold Steve Austin, those pieces of merch are very different. Those visual touch points and marketing materials are very different, but they're so authentic to who they are. So when people are saying it's important to be authentic to your brand story, this is really how you create that moment for yourself. And merchandise for these guys, you know, they're looking at things like flannel shirts, which we had talked about with building that visual identity. A little bonus point here because I noticed on their site they do some co-branding with LL Bean brand, so they're really connecting with that New England name. They're not just making koozies and throwing a logo on a koozie, they have these cool wooden koozies because that really connects with who they are in this, you know, off the trail brand. They have camping mugs, so not something you're gonna drink a beer out of necessarily, but it connects with the bigger part of the community that also happens to connect with their brands. And they have things like ski gaiters and dog gear, cornhole for backyard games, and I loved even this Jeep spare tire cover. So when we're looking at these merch lines or these visual touch points, this is what we're talking about when we say they're telling us a whole story, but there's no words here, but we can see those words behind the scenes through those visual cues. So that is the playbook. The biggest thing I want you to get out of today is definitely that. You know, taking it step by step, the two sentence, who are you? Three core value words, and then visuals that you can actually produce. Do it for your brand, and suddenly your labels, your point of sale, even your merch line, everything starts telling the same story. Now, depending on where you're at with your brand story, maybe you don't have a comprehensive merch line yet, and you just have a couple of things. They can still be more intentional instead of just a logo on a shirt. What's a way to tell your story in a more compelling way? Or even going beyond merch, the color that you paint the walls in your brewery, does that tell your story? It's all part of that visual language that cues to your end users who you are. Now, once you've defined that story, you really need to protect it. And that's where style guides come in. And again, if you're just starting out, this is more just an FYI that it's a good to have. Um, but a style guide lays out your rules. It's going to have your logos, your fonts, your colors, your do's and don'ts, and it's going to ensure that no matter who's making your merch, signage, or packaging, the story stays intact. And this is not just something for big companies. The earlier you start and have a style guide, the stronger your brand consistency will be as you grow. I actually think it's even better for small businesses because if you are growing quickly and you take someone on as a retail operations manager for you, if you don't have this style guide in place, and maybe you were making the visual decisions and the brand storytelling decisions, and now half of it split with someone else that you've hired on, if they don't have a strong sense of exactly what that three-step process is and what your brand story is, you might start to see some inconsistency in the way that story is told. So that's why these guides are really important. So this is just a random style guide I pulled as an example. I think there's some kind of good do's and don'ts to show here as a visual. So you're going to be looking, it will be simple, but it will have your basics of how to use your logos, the colors, font, etc. Um, High level, what I would say to look for when it comes to style guide usage and creation is keep it simple and consistently ask yourself, will this make sense in print? Will this make sense in digital media? The purpose of the style guide is to make sure you're protecting the various elements of your visual language, like your logo and your fonts and your colors. So you want to make sure you're thinking through real life instances where these things will be used. So as an example, one thing I would pick on with this random style guide is they have examples of logo usage. One thing that's really nice is they show it on a light color, dark color, and it's also one color because at some point something's going to be laser engraved, so you do need a one color version of your logo. Um, but one thing that I would say is missing is a horizontal logo. We only have these circles. So, if this was a brewer, at some point you're going to need printed pens, right? How is that circle logo going to be legible on a tiny little pen? So those are the kind of real life things you want to be thinking about when you're looking at your style guide. Again, like the mood board, I am not saying if you've never made a style guide, I'm not saying to be an expert and make one today, but at some point you might hire some help to create that style guide to protect your brand, and you want to be able to know what it is you're looking for when it comes to these elements. Now, for resources for help, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, don't worry, you don't need to do this all yourself. Um, these are the key points that I would take away for resources today if you are just starting out, especially. So, first and foremost, if you're thinking about creating some great merch, I would definitely find a promotional product distributor that you trust. Now, you want to find someone that speaks the same language as you, right? So you want to make sure you're finding someone that understands the sourcing and manufacturing of point of sale displays, retail merch, and on-premise items, giveaway items, etc. You, it would be helpful to know someone like me that has beverage and CPG experience. And if you are working on building the actual brand itself, you want to build your logo up, you want to create a style guide, or you want to work on putting together a mood board or visual language, I highly recommend leveraging freelance artists. You can use things like Upwork or Fiverr. And this is something that brands have done for a long time. Fun fact, in 1971, the Nike co-founder Phil Knight did just that and paid a graphic design student locally, Carolyn Davidson, $35 to design that iconic Nike swoosh, which today, as we talked about earlier, is easily one of the most recognizable logos in the world. Um, so you can leverage either freelance artists or, like in this case, you can consider college students and interns if you are near a college or university. That's a great part of a brand story. It's also a great way to help these people, like freelance artists and students and interns, build up their portfolio as well. And when you start to build this up, once you've done it for yourself, one thing I would say for sure is to do some competitive research. I would do this three-step process that we talked about and do it with your competitors as well. Perhaps it's competitors, meaning other Massachusetts brewers, or maybe it's aspirational competitors like a larger scale distribution brand. You can analyze who's telling their story well and what gaps you can fill in. You can run through this exercise and maybe see who's not doing it very well or how you would do it differently. These small steps are really going to add up, and there's plenty of resources to help you along the way for that. Now, one thing I want to say when it comes to competitive research, the whole idea of these steps and pulling this all together is to create a brand story that's authentic to you, to who you are. So you're not doing this competitive research to try to be like XYZ Brewing, right? The whole point of this is not to just do what someone else is doing. This is to do what conveys who you are. And that's how, even on small levels, like when you walk into your own brewery, how it's the choices of the stools, the color of the walls, the lighting, how these are all going to convey who you are. And now you don't feel like just another brewery, you feel like exactly who you are. And I've breezed through this a little bit faster than I expected, but final thoughts. One thing, I really want you to remember is marketing is asking someone on a date, and branding is the reason why they're going to say yes. Storytelling makes you and your bottle stand out on the shelf. Merch is a powerful amplifier, but only when it's rooted in authentic storytelling. And style guides protect your story as you go. Remember, your brand is more than your logo or product. It's the story you tell people and how you connect with them, the experience they remember, and the reason why they come back. So dive in, have fun with it, and let's help your brand story shine. And we are going to open up for questions as well. But I did want to just share some ability to connect with me if you want to chat about building your brand, especially if you want to build it through meaningful merch. This QR code is a link to my LinkedIn. I would love to connect there. Here's all my contact information. And I would love to take some questions now.
I'm loving all of the WWE references and how they've guided your entire career. Well, welcoming questions, you can type them into the chat or you can raise your hand and just unmute yourself once I call upon you. Whatever's easier if you want to spare your fingers. I mean, I think what I'm seeing right now in the brewery space is for brands that have been around for, maybe they've been around 7, 10 years. They're thinking about a brand refresh. So I'd love to maybe talk about some of the pitfalls that you can have with that, right? Consistency is key. Nike is Nike. What do you need when you're starting to think like things are stagnant? We need to do something. Is a brand refresh the right thing? And if so, what are some best practices there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think there's a couple of things to kind of dive into when you're thinking about a brand refresh, right? Um, One, identifying exactly what you're trying to do. Are you trying to do a full rebrand, meaning like new logo, new everything? Or are you trying to refresh what you already have? And two, before you even get started, is I think you really have to answer the question, why? Is there kind of a compelling story behind it, or do you feel like you should do it again because other people are doing it? Recently, I've worked on two brand refreshes, one with Walker Clay and one with the local museum. So I'll run through kind of both examples to show why it was happening and the story behind it. So at Walker Clay, in 2026, we're celebrating our 70th anniversary year. Also, we're third generation owned, and the logo hasn't refreshed since the third generation has owned it. And this third generation is also female owned. It's owned by two sisters. So there was a lot of the story that was missing from the old branding that we wanted to bring into this new 70th year, third generation female owned. We wanted to tell that story and really celebrate that. So it felt like a really relevant time and place to do that. And we were also really intentional with it because it's been 14, 15 years, so it made sense. But if we had just rebranded a few years ago, even if we wanted to tell this great story, it might have been better for a refresh in that sense, because part of the whole point of this is recognizing the brand, right? So if you're constantly changing the logo or the assets or the visuals, you might be telling great stories, but you might be losing people, or people might start to forget who you are because you're not building that recognition. Um, Another refresh I recently worked on was with the museum, and they had an old logo that really didn't tell their story at all. And the museum is this very cool museum on the Cape that has three historic houses on the property. So in the refresh with them, I built their style guide and their new visuals. And in the logo, we made icons of each house, and that became the logo. And now, like, the full brand story came about. But again, it wasn't randomly like one day they just wanted a new logo. Their house was built by an American Revolutionary War veteran, and it's the 250th anniversary. So it was really timely to do that. So, long-winded answer to the first part of it, but I would say answer why and really identify what you want to do. And, what I had started to say earlier is, do you want to do a brand refresh or a rebrand? The reason why I say that is because if you go through that and you answer why and you run through that whole exercise, you might come to the other side and say, we like the logo. Everyone recognizes it. We just want to zhuzh it up a little bit. And if that's the case, you might just want to refresh the style guide you already have, keep some of the icons, maybe clean them up, maybe just define it more. And that's where this three-step process can really come in for you. And you can just do that process with maybe you just have a logo and you really didn't do the rest, right? So those would be the parameters that I would use to start with.
That's super helpful. Um, Another question that I have for you is, obviously our brewers are, they're not Nike. They don't have millions of dollars to put out like incredible merch. But they still want to have carry some products in their tap rooms. You have limited space, limited funds to buy like you can't buy 1,000, right? So what are you seeing trend wise that's really moving that could really selling and resonating with consumers right now? Is it still the t-shirt and glass, or like what would your recommendation be for a brewer and what they should carry in their retail area?
Well, in terms of trends, there are always going to be there's going to be your tried and trues like your apparel, your glass, all of that. There are certainly things trending right now. I have a trend report that I'd be happy to send along to anyone that's participating that would like to see, that's kind of unpacking what we're seeing in the market. I'm seeing a lot of like miniature keychain things, bag charms, that sort of thing. That's really trending in this space. And what I would say is it's great to incorporate a trend, but especially the smaller you are as a brand, I wouldn't chase trends. I mean, the biggest thing when it comes to compelling merch, and I really hope I drove that home with the Stone Cold Steve Austin thing, is really finding something that's authentic to you, right? So a good example is that Long Trail Ale. I loved that like wood koozie that I had found when shopping their merch. And that's not a trending item, right?
Mhm.
And it was kind of expensive for a piece of merch, but I could see myself at the brewery in Killington buying that because I'm like, oh, I'm having this whole immersive experience at this brewery. I'm like on the side of a trail and like, look, this looks like it was cut outside. So sometimes it's more important to really just think about and be intentional about, does this piece of merch connect with my brand story, than about, is this thing something cool that people have seen elsewhere? Because if it's cool and they've seen it elsewhere, why would they buy it from you?
Mm.
But if you can combine the two and this connects and it's also trending, then of course you have magic. But I think the more important thing is just really, especially if your merch line is small and the offering is small, really being intentional about, why am I getting this product? What, don't just throw your logo on a t-shirt, but is there a catchphrase that all of the people that go to your brewery say, right? Or are you near a mill and you put the mill on there? Or is there a part of your brand story that you want to connect in your merch and you feel like it kind of tugs at the heartstrings? Maybe you started brewing with your dog and you love your dog, so you have a your dog on a t-shirt, it's something like that. Just more authenticity and less chasing a trend, I think would be an important way to go.
Yeah, grounding yourself in your community too. Folks love those nods to their hometown and have that pride. Well, I haven't seen any questions come through, so you must have done such a good job that nobody has any questions. But the good news is that she is available for any follow-ups. If folks, if you think of something that you want to ask, um, our friends at Walker Clay are more than happy to take your call, take your email, and talk it through with you. So, thank you so much for your time today, sharing your expertise. This recording, along with all others, will be available in our February Winter Series G Drive. I will recirculate that for folks. And thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.